Let me ask you two sets of questions. Number one, do you have any shares? Do you have any bonds? Or do you have any REITs? Or do you have any real estate? The second set of questions, do you have any credit card debt? Do you have any student loan debt? Do you have any car finance or any personal loans? Now, for the majority of people, the answer to the first set of questions is no, but the answer to the second set is yes. And so if you're one of the people thinking, wow, I don't have any stocks or bonds or real estate, but I do have credit card debt, student loan debt, or car finance, well, let me tell you this. It is not your fault. This is the way society has been set up today. In the US, the top 50% control 98% of the total wealth, and just the top 1% own 40% of the nation's wealth. Here in the UK, the top 10% of households own 44% of the wealth. The bottom 50% have nothing. So why is it that the rich keep getting richer? I mean, everyone says it, and it is easy to say, but why is this happening? There's got to be a reason for it. Well, let me tell you straight up, there isn't some sort of magic formula that is making the rich richer, okay? They take certain actions that other people don't take. I mean, for rich people, the answer to that first set of questions would have been a big yes. Everyone wants financial freedom. I mean, it sounds good, right? Being financially free, but a lot of people just don't know what they need to do in order to get that. And no one teaches you this. I mean, the rich definitely don't want you to know. And when I first learned this, it changed me completely. The fact that I'm standing here doing this YouTube video is because of what I learned. So I'm telling you now, if you just watch this single video from start to end, you'll be much closer to bringing financial freedom from a dream to a reality than the majority of people ever will. Hey, what's up people? Welcome back to our channel, Ralph Finance UK. Now, everyone knows the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. We've been hearing this statement for many, many years. And with today's society pushing everyone to become a consumer, along with many advertisers being so skilled to convince you to buy products, the majority of people are making two critical mistakes. And the worst part of it is they don't even realize. We now have many people focusing on buying liabilities and not focusing on buying assets at all. And people are using debt for the wrong reasons. In the US, the top 1% have a combined wealth of over $34 trillion. And the bottom 50% only have $2 trillion. When we look at the data, it is mind-blowing. It has never been more clear why the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer. With car finance and finance on your TV and finance on your phone and finance on your laptop being everywhere, all of these are just being thrown at you. No payment for the first 6 months or 0% finance available. They are convincing you to spend as much as possible on your car, your TV, your laptop. They say buy now, pay later, buy now, pay later. We hear this over and over. They are trying to throw all these deals at you. You type finance deals into Google and you'll see. And all this does is fuel that wealth divide. And so it looks like the situation is only going to get worse. I mean, the wealth divide has never been as large as it is today. On this chart, we can see how much wealth the top 1% in the US have, then the next 9%, then the next 40%, and finally the bottom 50%. And we can see this data from 1989. And immediately we see that the bottom 50% has an almost negligible amount when compared to the rest. The top 1% have $34 trillion and the bottom 50% only have $2 trillion. We can see that we've always had this wealth gap divide, but it has just been getting larger and larger and larger. And it's the exact same situation here in the UK. And we can really begin to understand just how powerful the top 1% are when we consider they have $34 trillion and the next 9%, which is a 9 times larger population, they only have $43 trillion. So the top 1% have nearly the same wealth as the next 9%. And if we look at the top 50% of a whole, well, they have more than 98% of the total wealth. That means half the people have nearly all the wealth. The other half are left with nothing. From 1989 to now, the top 1% have managed to take their wealth from $5 trillion all the way to $34 trillion. So they have significantly grown over the last 30 years, and they've managed to accumulate $29 trillion. We can see that the next 9% and the next 40% after, they've also grown pretty much in line with the top 1%. I mean, the next 9% have taken their wealth from $8 trillion to $43 trillion over the last 30 years. Now what's mind-blowing is that if we only look at the bottom 50%, they've only managed to take their wealth from $0.75 trillion to $2 trillion. That's only a $1.25 trillion worth of growth. The bottom 50% are significantly poorer today than what the 1% were back in 1989, 30 years ago. And so back in 1989, this wealth gap between the top 1% and the bottom 50% was $3.25 trillion. And now it is $32 trillion. So the wealth gap has grown over 10 times in the last 30 years. So what is it that the rich are doing? Well, it's this mindset. What the rich focus on is completely different to what the poor focus on. Rich people focus on acquiring assets, not liabilities, and this is one of the major reasons for that wealth divide. The simplest explanation of assets and liabilities is that assets put money into your pocket and liabilities take money out of your pocket. So an asset could be a rental property that produces a positive cash flow on a monthly basis, or it could be an investment that you make into the financial markets that increases in value over time and produces an income for you, such as stocks, bonds, or REITs, or it could be a business that produces you income. These are all assets as they put money into your pocket. Liabilities, on the other hand, are credit card debt, student loan debt, car finance, personal loans. These are all liabilities as they take money out of your pocket. So this chart shows what assets the different categories own, and we immediately see that the bottom 50% hardly own any assets when compared to the others. The top 1% own $35 trillion of assets, the next 9% own $45 trillion, the next 40% own $39 trillion of assets, and the bottom 50%, well, they own just $7 trillion of assets. And we can see that corporate equities and mutual fund shares and private businesses make up a large portion of the assets of the top 10%. Yet the bottom 50% hardly own any of these. So we see that the poor have the least assets. But what is really mind-blowing is when we take a look at this. Just look at this. The bottom 50% not only have the least assets, but they have some of the highest liabilities, whereas the top 1%, they have the least liabilities. The top 1% have $0.7 trillion of liabilities, whereas the bottom 50% have nearly $5 trillion. So the bottom 50% own 5 times less assets than the top 1%, yet they own 7 times the liabilities. Even the range of 50 to 90%, we see they have the most liabilities, yet they don't have the most assets. So even that is concerning. When we look at private businesses, we see that the rich own $6.6 trillion of private business, whereas the bottom 50% own just $0.2 trillion of private business. Overall, the poor have the least assets and the most liabilities, whereas the rich have the most assets and the least liabilities. Rich people are so focused on building assets, whereas the majority of people are just focused on purchasing liabilities. When the majority of people think of money, they think in terms of spending that money. And so when most people receive their paycheck, they spend that money on liabilities, whether it is clothes, cars, gadgets, or vacations. Now this is great for the economy because people spending stimulates the economy, and when people spending every dollar they make, they will probably look rich by driving that fancy car and having some fancy clothes, but this mindset will not help you build wealth. Poor people ensure that everyone else gets paid first before themselves, but on the other hand, when rich people make money, they make it their mission to pay themselves first before they pay anybody else. It's an invest first and spend second mindset, and so they cannot wait to spend their money to build assets and build their multiple sources of income other than just their job. They think about which shares to buy, which bonds to buy, which real estate to buy, or which REITs to buy, and all of these assets give them that steady stream of passive income over time. A really good way to distinguish between the mindset of the rich and the poor, well, it's the difference between spending hours and hours researching what clothes you want to buy compared to spending hours and hours researching what stocks you want to buy. Now, I know some of you might be thinking all of this sounds a bit harsh. Well, this is the harsh reality, and sometimes you just have to be straight up about it. If you want to achieve great things, that it can pay just to take a step back and be straight up with yourself. I just want to say, if you are finding value out of this video, then I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that thumbs up button. I mean, it's a two-way thing. You'll get more of our videos recommended to you, and in return, it helps us to grow the channel. And yeah, we've got a lot more content coming that you're not going to want to miss. So also hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next video. Now, rich people understand that their job does not have to be their only source of income, or even their biggest source of income. Pretty much every poor person just relies on their job. But according to a study done by the IRS, which is like the HMRC equivalent over in America, this is the breakdown of how the rich make most of their money. So we can see that 45.5% of their income comes from capital gains, 19.9% from partnerships and corporations, 13% from dividends, only 8.6% from their salaries, and 6.6% from interest. And so we can see that salary actually makes up a very small portion of the income for a rich person, and even this is mind-blowing because for the majority of people, 100% of their income comes from their salary, whereas the rich are able to build their various streams of passive income so that they do not solely rely on their salaries at all. And so a main difference between the rich and the poor is that the rich do not work for a paycheck. Now, there is nothing wrong with starting out by working for a paycheck, but a great way to start building your assets is by taking a percentage of your salary every month and putting it aside for your investments. Overall, it is about shifting your mindset, so do make sure to check out the rest of our videos on how you can create other streams of income. You must realize that every liability you buy is an asset for someone else. When a rich person thinks about Apple, they think about how they can capitalize on Apple's growth, and so they buy shares of Apple. But when a poor person thinks about Apple, they're not even thinking about buying shares of Apple. They're only ever going to think of Apple in terms of the products they sell. So they'll be thinking about what phone or what laptop to buy, and that's it. So the rich person will buy an asset, the shares of Apple, because they will get income from dividends and stock price appreciation. Whereas the poor person will only ever buy a liability, the phone, which will be taking money out of their pocket. Of course, rich people buy iPhones as well, but the point I'm trying to make here is that they will probably also have shares of Apple as well. And remember, one person's liability is another person's asset. The phone will be taking money out of the poor person's pocket, so it is a liability for them, yet Apple will be making money off that phone. Now, many people think their home is their asset. Your home is not an asset, it is a liability. Every month you pay money towards your mortgage, and so because your mortgage is taking money out of your pocket, it is a liability. However, your home is an asset to your bank, as your home is making their money every single month in the form of mortgage interest payments. If you now had a rental property, then every month you take the rental income, you pay the management fees, you then pay the mortgage for that property, and then the plan is for you to be left with a profit. And so a rental property is putting money into your pocket, and so it is an asset. Let's look at Bill Gates. Now, while he does own just over 1.3% of Microsoft, he has a significant portfolio outside of Microsoft. 50% of his portfolio is invested in Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, and his other investments include Waste Management, Canadian National Railway Company, Caterpillar, and Walmart. So when people think of Bill Gates, they just think of Microsoft, yet a good portion of his wealth is outside of Microsoft. Now, liabilities can be made up of good debt and bad debt. Now, debt is not a bad thing provided you use it properly. Debt was invented as a way for people to grow. The whole idea was for you to borrow money, use this money to buy assets which produce more money, more than enough to cover the interest expense on the debt, and so you can use this income to pay off the original debt while pocketing the difference. This was known as good debt, and it was a great way for people to grow, and this was the true purpose of debt. And to this day, the rich still use debt in this way to grow. However, with advertisers becoming so powerful and convincing people, now we find that most poor people are using debt to buy liabilities, and this is known as bad debt. This is completely not what debt was intended for, but somehow it's become so normal to do this. Now, if we have a look at consumer debt, such as credit card debt, car loans, payday loans, and so on, we can see that the top 1% have just $0.07 trillion of consumer debt, and this has hardly increased over the last 30 years. Whereas the bottom 50%, they have a substantial $2.3 trillion of debt, and this is growing substantially year on year. So now, putting everything together, we see that not only do the bottom 50% have the least assets and the most liabilities, they have the most consumer debt as well. And it makes sense because people nowadays are taking out debt to buy cars, buy holidays, buy expensive designer clothes, or buy the latest gadgets, and so on. 30 years ago, buying a car on finance was much less common, but nowadays it has become so normal. When a rich person uses debt to purchase an asset, they ensure that the returns generated by that asset are greater than the interest on the debt, and so they can pocket the difference. But when a poor person uses debt to, say, buy a car on finance, that car isn't giving you any income. If anything, it is depreciating. And so not only do you have to pay the interest on the money you borrowed to buy that car in the first place, you also lose money on what you purchased. And this is because you use debt to purchase a liability and not an asset. And so a rich person will use debt to make themselves richer, whereas a poor person, they'll use debt to make themselves poorer. Let's consider we have two people. Person A, who has the normal consumer mindset of buying liabilities and consuming bad debt, and person B, who has a rich mindset. Now let's consider both of these people take out a loan of £40,000 at 5% interest for 5 years, so the monthly payments will be £750. Now person A gets this £40,000 and they spend it on a brand new car, and now every single month they will get their salary, they'll take out £750 from this and they'll pay the loan company. At the end of the 5 years, they have paid just over £45,000 in total to the loan company, and they have a car that is now depreciated to around £15,000. So they have made a net loss of £30,000 over the 5 years. Now, on the other hand, person B decides to invest this £40,000 for 5 years at a return of 10% per year. Now, because the loan interest rate is 5%, overall, by the end of the 5 years, person B has made a net gain of £7,000. So they both started with £40,000, but yet person A finds that after 5 years, they've made a net loss of £30,000, whereas person B has made a net gain of £7,000. That is a £37,000 difference, yet they started with the same amount of money 5 years ago. This is a very simple example of how the rich are using debt in their favour. And actually, you'll find personal loan rates generally range from around 3% to 36%, and you'll find that rich people tend to have higher credit scores, and this allows them to borrow at that 3% mark, whereas poor people have to pay much higher rates. Overall, the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, and this is because of that mindset difference. So what do we take away from this video? Well, it is as simple as this. Go through life acquiring assets and not liabilities. It's almost a guaranteed way to be in that top 10%. Wealthy people make it their mission to buy assets. They use debt to help them grow and build up their multiple streams of income. They do not work for a paycheck, and their goal is not to make companies like Microsoft or Apple rich. They use Microsoft and Apple to get rich. Rich people will earn while they sleep. Poor people will only earn when they're at work. The default path in society today is to become a consumer. Consume, consume, consume. But all you need to do is change your mindset. Knowledge is an extremely powerful tool, but it does start with your mindset. Now, the fact that you've watched this video till the end, it already sets you aside from the majority of people. I mean, I know it was a long video, but for many of you, this is the first real step towards financial freedom, from turning it into something that was a dream into something that is very real. Now, in the next few videos, I'm going to share with you how you can start investing into assets and building your assets up and becoming part of that rich statistic. But I really wanted to do this video first because what I covered today is so important. Many people just don't realize. So if you found value out of this video, which honestly I hope you did, then all I ask is please do give us a thumbs up. That way you get more of our videos recommended to you, and in return it helps our channel to grow. And yeah, we've got a lot more content coming, so hit that subscribe button as well because you won't want to miss the next one. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.